All right, welcome everyone. My name is Sydney Kobza, and I serve as the Assistant Administrator for the Office of Career Technical and Adult Education here at the Nebraska Department of Education. We're excited to welcome you today to our CTE Grants Administration meeting, and we have a jam-packed agenda today, sharing lots of updates, information, and just some things to look forward to over the summer and in the coming school year. And so we'll start with some brief introductions so you know who from NDE is on the call. We will then discuss, Katie, if you don't mind going back a couple slides. We will then share just some updates with the Perkins grant as well as the CTE grant. We were audited this year, and so we have some learnings that we want to pass on to you to make closeouts and applications and all of those pieces as seamless as possible. We'll share some updates with our data reporting and accountability, including some resources, as well as we look ahead, thinking about some professional development opportunities and upcoming resources that we're going to provide you all, and then just sharing what we're here for technical assistance. And so with our welcome and introduction, I'd love to introduce the Nebraska Department of Education CTE team who are on the call, and I'll kick it over to Dr. Katie Graham, followed by Amanda Cole.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're excited to have you. I'm Katie Graham. I have the great privilege of serving as the State Director for Career and Technical Education here at the Department of Education.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amanda Cole. I'm a CTE grant specialist.
Kevin, will you go next, followed by Terry?
Kevin Dahlman, I'm the CTE data specialist.
Good morning. I'm Terry Slope, the Perkins Grant Manager.
Sean, then Charisse.
Morning, I'm Sean Young, Computer Science and Technology Education.
Good morning, I'm Therese Marzuk, and I serve as Workforce Partnership Specialist and manage the Revision Action Grant.
Jamie, followed by Miranda.
Hi, I'm Jamie Denny. I'm the Health Science Specialist and HOSA State Advisor.
Good morning. My name is Miranda Bright, and I serve as a Human Sciences and Education Career Field Specialist.
Sarah, followed by Chelsea.
Hey everyone, I'm Sarah Heidemann. I am the Ag Food and Natural Resources Career Field Specialist and State of the Bay Advisor.
Good morning, I'm Chelsea Green. I also serve as a Human Sciences and Education Career Field Specialist and the Nebraska FCCLA and Educators Rising State Advisor.
I believe that was all the NDE folks that are on the call. As you can see, we have a wonderful team here ready to serve. We are also excited that we will be onboarding a new school counseling specialist in June, as well as a new business marketing and management specialist in June as well. And so I will kick it over to Dr. Katie Graham.
All righty. Well, starting off with the grant, which is why you all are here. Thought we would tackle the main question first, as everyone has been asking, is when will you receive your allocations for both the Perkins grants as well as the state CTE grants? Wanted to share with you a little bit about both. For the federal grant, we are still awaiting our state's allocation for the federal Perkins grant. We have received indication to expect level funding. So if you wanted to start on your budget, which we encourage you to do, use last year's totals as a starting place, knowing, unless there's new circumstances, that we would expect about the same state allocation, which is then run through the formula for your local allocation. For the state grant, we have similar good news. In the current draft biennium budget, it is also staying at the same rate. So we also expect level funding for the state CTE grant. So you can, again, use last year's as a great starting place to do your budget. More than anything, as soon as we know what those allocations are, you will know. We will make sure to communicate that as absolutely as quickly as possible. We have all of our formulas and documents ready. So as soon as we get that total number, we will be able to communicate that out to all of you. While we don't know when, we certainly know how. You might be wondering, or have always wondered, how do we come up with your Perkins and state grant allocations? This is directly from the Perkins legislation For secondary allocations, 30% of your total allocation is based on the number of school-aged students who reside in your district for the preceding year. And 70% of your allocation is those same school-aged children, but live below the poverty threshold. All of these data come from the Census Bureau. And again, it's for the preceding year. So if you're ever questioning the numbers, we're always looking a year back. The state grant by law uses the exact same formula, with the difference of any district who receives less than $7,500 would be bumped up to that minimum. All right. For the post-secondary allocations, the formula is a little bit different. And again, it's the same for the state grant as well as the Perkins grant. And this is calculated based on the number of CTE learners who are either recipients of the federal Pell Grant or are receiving assistance from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And then those totals are collected, and the total allocation is proportionally split across the different post-secondary institutions. All of these data are provided directly by the post-secondary institutions through their regular annual data collections, which is another reason when we get to Kevin, it's imperative that our data are accurate because it has a lot of implications. So we've been talking about these two grants, which it's a great problem to have. We've been so grateful for this state investment. We thought it would be helpful to share some differences between the two grants. So I'm going to kick it over to Amanda Cole, who is going to go through the differences between the Perkins grant and the state CTE grant. Amanda?
Good morning. Everybody can hear me? Okay, so our Perkins grant, let's see here, is the federal source, and the state CTE grant is the state source. The flow through to LEAs is $5.992 million for the Perkins grant and $4,809,040 for the state grant. For the applicant or recipient in the federal grant, it's for Perkins, it's district, college, or consortium, and for the state, it's either the district or the college. For the allocation, as Katie talked about, we have a formula for the Perkins grant, and it's a formula for the state grant and a minimum of $7,500. The grant year runs between July 1st and June 30th for both grants. The application and budget are due for both in the spring. The closeout, there is a grant closeout for both. Also, both do accept amendments. And the required uses of funds, the Perkins grant has 6 and the state CTE grant has none. Eligible expenditures, we have an upcoming grant administrator's guide that you'll refer to, and that'll give you the allocations and eligible expenses, as well as the state CTE uses Perkins Plus, which is a couple extra allocations that are listed in the guide. The capital assets are now $10,000 for the Perkins grant and $5,000 for the state CTE grant. And for the Perkins grant, there must be a form that's pre-approved for the capital assets. It's a form that you fill out for anything over $10,000. An annual narrative reporting, the Perkins grant it requires, and the state CTE grant does not. And as everything that we do here, it's based on the revision outcomes. Now we also have our revision action grant, and the funding source is our federal Perkins grant. We have approximately $1 million available for the allocation. The recipient is the district, college, or consortium. The grant year also runs between July 1st of 2025 through June 30th of 26. The application and budget were due in March, so that has closed. The grant closeout date is August of 2026. We do not accept any amendments. The eligible expenses are also listed in the grants administrator's guide. Capital assets are $10,000, and I believe that capital assets form also needs to be completed. There is an annual reporting narrative requirement, and it's also based on our revision outcomes. I'm going to turn this over to Terry to take you to the next slide.
Next slide. There we go. Okay. Okay, important dates and deadlines. This is just a summary of all the important dates for both grants. And at first glance, it appears everything is due for 24-25. However, if you notice, the budget templates are actually being or will be written for 25-26. And as we had spoke about earlier, we do not have a deadline for when these are due in GMS because we still don't have our allocations. So just a reminder of some of the things that are required for the Perkins grant. It is required that you complete the annual grant narrative, and this will be completed if you need to write a performance improvement plan or if you have a career academy. And then just keep in mind that the required uses of Perkins funds over the next 3.5 years need to be addressed in your budgets at least once. So we don't want to wait until year 4 to realize that, oh, we never spent any funds on one of these uses of funds or required uses of funds. So just something to keep in mind. And this is only Perkins. For the grant narrative, you do not need one of these for the state grant. Okay. Just a reminder again, the budget template, your planned expenditures must run from July 1st to June 30th. There is no obligation of funds before July 1st that we can approve. So just keep that in mind. You can shop and get quotes, but do not create a purchase order that's dated before July 1st. They must be aligned with your approved local Perkins application and revision outcomes. We will be spot checking these, so be sure that you're aware of what your revision outcomes and action steps are before you plan your budget. And then, as always, all the expenditures must be pre-approved. We do check the budgets to make sure that they were pre-approved. And unless you've had an amendment, we cannot approve payment reimbursement for something that had not been submitted for pre-approval in our office. And just a note that the state grant, they must submit their own budget template. We do have 2 templates. They're on different websites. The state budget is on the state grants website, and the Perkins budget is also on the Perkins admin webpage, and they are somewhat different. So if we have one that's submitted that belongs to the other grant, we have to send it back. So just something to keep in mind. Improved CTE budgets. We'd like to thank everyone that we had asked to test run this for us. We designed and created a new budget template for both grants this year. Hopefully it'll make things easier, faster, and more comprehensive. Just a reminder that members, if you are a member of a consortium, you do not create a budget template for Perkins, but only for the state grant. The Perkins, your ESU grant coordinators do all the hard work on that. So you only are responsible for the state CTE budget template. Okay. Our GEPA. So for the federal grants, the GEPA, if you remember in GMS, there's a tab devoted to GEPA, General Education Provisions Act. And this is something I think is carried over from what you wrote the prior year, but just something to reread if you find that it's already filled out when you're creating your application. Check to make sure that things haven't changed or need to be updated. We do read these, we do have to approve them. And so if there's any editing that you need to do, such as maybe your timeline, your milestones, new barriers that have been identified, please address those in this form. And like I said, we do have to read these and approve these before we can approve your application. Reapproval. This is especially important if you're not familiar with the grant processes. All CTE grants have to have pre-approval before the obligation or purchase of funds, including even if it's on a credit card. It has to be pre-approved before. So when is your pre-approval considered active? Once your budget template has been submitted and approved in GMS, and that's when we will review it. If you needed a grant amendment, because the budgets are made so far ahead of time, and we understand things change, sometimes an amendment is due, so you need to purchase something differently. That's when you'll submit an amendment through the GMS, and that is for both the state and the federal grants. And then in certain cases, your NDE monitor can approve something through email, and that would be a situation maybe something that you had budgeted for is no longer available, so you want to get the next model up. You would still need pre-approval, but that can be handled in an email since it's basically the same item, just more enhanced. Anything, and I think I just sent this, anything that has not been pre-approved, we may need to deny it off your claim for reimbursement. Capital assets. So I think somebody started a rumor last year you'd no longer need to do this form, and I think it was me, and that is wrong. So once again, this year, we have to have our pre-approval form completed before you submit your application. And this is only for the Perkins grant. And they did raise the rate to 10,000 or more per item. So the process is this form can be filled out. I believe it's on our website. Not sure if I think it's on another federal program's website, but you fill out the form, get your administrator sign it, and then you submit it through the ticket system. That sends it to us for pre-approval. We sign it, and you get a copy back after our signature. That's the copy that you go into GMS and upload into the Capital Assets tab, not the Uploads tab. It's confusing, but just remember, you're submitting something for capital assets, so you want it uploaded in the Capital Assets tab. And also in this Capital Assets tab, you still need to fill out, there's some text boxes in there. You just write the simple description of what you're purchasing, how much it is. I think it's location. And then for each item, you would do the same text boxes. GMS allows you to keep adding, but that's where you would complete that process for capital assets pre-approval, Perkins grants only. And then just some general accounting reminders. Some of the things that we run through when we're looking at your closeouts. The date, of course, as we said, has to be during the grant period. Specific work for stipends and time and effort. We have had to change or send back some forms that were submitted showing a stipend that were only designated as curriculum work. Well, the auditors all want to know, why are you charging this to a federal Perkins grant? So we need something specific that actually addresses CTE or Perkins or career education, just something a little more descriptive than curriculum work or planning. And so also, this is a good time of year to review your category coding. As I said before, we understand that your budgets were made almost a year ago. And so now you're getting to the end of the grant year. You realize you need more funding in professional development or in supplies. So this would be the time that you might need to submit an amendment. Working meal reminders. Okay, well, as you all know, the feds look very closely at our use of funds, and they want to know what have we done with these funds to enhance CTE in Nebraska. Paid for free lunch is something that's a little bit difficult to justify, so we must have all this requirement in order to pre-approve this working lunch. And then I believe we also have these instructions in our management guide. And so just something to keep in mind, if you're planning to spend money on food, it has to be very well justified.
Carrie, I'm going to chime in. With those working meals, just know that Terry shared in a very kind way, there will be increased scrutiny in reviewing those different agendas, the need for them, the justification. And so, as she mentioned, these are limited funds, these are limited federal funds. And so we really want to make sure that they are being used to maximize high quality CTE programs in your districts. And so when completing this working meal documentation, feel free to reach out to us with questions, but know that these must be complete. They must be well justified if you plan on using federal dollars for working meals.
Hey,
Thanks,
Sydney, does that include like we're sending folks on a conference for their meals on the conference?
No, that's a great question. And so, no, that is part of travel.
Okay.
So yes, thank you for asking that. And I do want to point out too, if you are asking questions in the chat, Terry just shared a lot of information. And so if you have questions, we have a lot of NDE staff here that can help answer those questions. So with that, I think, Kay, this is the perfect segue to after the audit.
Everyone's favorite section. I know that's what everybody's been looking forward to. I know we've alluded to it a number of times, but this year Perkins was selected as part of the state single audit. So we wanted to share the results of our audit and tell you a little bit about the process and the findings and how we're going to approach our work, which no doubt will have an impact on you all. I'll also share, for many of us, this was our first time going through an audit. So we learned a lot, and hopefully we can share some of those learnings with you as well. All right, so the process. This started way back last fall when we were notified by the state auditor that Perkins was selected as part of the statewide single audit. The process kicked off with us responding to a lot of questions about our processes, and then they began testing different payments that were made. We received preliminary findings in February. We responded with our corrective action plan, and then everything was finalized and sent to the commissioner, as well as the U.S. Department of Education last month. So what did they look for? The auditors took a look at our allowability controls, eligibility controls, period of performance, allocations, our maintenance of effort, certainly subrecipient monitoring, which is what we're going to talk about now. And then, of course, they tested different payments based on our processes. So what did we find? Starting with the audit findings. So they tested 11 specific payments, and they found that 3 of those we lacked sufficient documentation on. So I wanted to also start off by saying, in general, we are doing a fantastic job. The findings were all based on lack of documentation. There weren't findings about inappropriate uses of funds or anything like that. So all in all, kudos. I know everyone is working hard to do what we know is the best way to do it. So thank you, thank you. But there were just a couple instances that we wanted to share, 3 specific scenarios where we were lacking documentation, and in some areas we hadn't really focused on that before. And mainly they related to conference expenses and stipends, time and effort, and per diem. And so those are the 3 that we wanted to share with you today. So we're going to do a little stories. Okay. So one reimbursement to a community college included salaries and benefits for 2 employees. The documentation to support the salaries and benefits the auditor determined was inadequate. We did provide from the college provided to us, and we provided to the auditor time and effort certification stating that the employee worked 50% on career and technical Perkins and 50% on a different program. However, no other documentation, such as an employee work schedule to corroborate the 50% on CTE, was provided. And because of that, the auditor questioned the total cost as potentially lacking documentation. So what does that mean? Especially for those who are charging salaries or a percentage of salaries to Perkins, we just want to make sure that at least semi-annually, additional time and effort certification and documentation is provided. And this would really include specific activities or a work schedule or something that can back up and reflect that the total hours compensated on that schedule were what was stated in terms of the split of costs. This doesn't have to be submitted all the time, but it could be a part of the regular semi-annual certification. And again, especially if there's a percentage split of time, there needs to be additional documentation showing, hours, dates worked. It could be a schedule, a couple different things would suffice. But that is why we received a finding on this, because they considered our documentation insufficient. One of the things that will also help this is the updated budget template that we provided. That's going to provide for more specificity, and that will again help with the backup documentation. All right, our second finding. So here's an example of where a reimbursement to an ESU was made, which then the ESU made payments to schools in order for the school to reimburse its teachers for the cost of attending a conference and also paying the teachers a stipend for attending the conference. The payment to the teachers was to include the hotel, registration fees, you can see mileage, and then a stipend for each day that they attended the conference. However, documentation wasn't provided to support that the reimbursements or the stipends actually went to the teachers, or if the school should have kept some of that payment for the hotels and registration fees if they paid that directly. Additionally, they found that documentation was lacking to support that the teachers actually stayed at the hotel or that the school paid for the hotel. And then lastly, documentation wasn't provided to support that the stipend amount was reasonable and approved by appropriate personnel. There was a lot in there. And because of that, they questioned the full amount, the $11,192. So you can see in here, there's a few things that we don't typically ask for, but we do expect the district to have on file if requested. So again, thinking of how would we show the teachers actually stayed at the hotel, or what were direct expenses versus stipend, or do we have a stipend policy on file to show that the amount was approved? So just a couple reminders related to this finding. Employees who are in travel status on official business certainly can charge cost on an actual cost basis, on a per diem basis, on a mileage basis, or even a combination if it's very well documented. And things that we would expect you all at the local level to have on file. And I'll just reiterate, this is coming from the Code of Federal Regulations. So this isn't specific to Perkins. This is for all federal funds. Per 2 CFR, you should have a travel policy on file. And this would include what would be paid for, whether it's on a per diem basis, whether it's on an actual cost basis. Everything should be spelled out either at the district level, or if this is a consortium or college, at each of those levels. It should also include documentation that a teacher or an instructor or an administrator was approved to use their personal vehicle if that's going to be reimbursed, verification that the vehicle was actually used, some documentation of mileage, agendas, which we're pretty good about always making sure we collect. This is also to make sure if meals were provided, we're able to take those off. And then, of course, payroll information if there's a stipend to a teacher showing that the teacher actually received those funds. I just want to also make a note. We're going to share all these slides, so we'll be sure you have all of these notes. Related to conferences and stipends, so I mentioned this a minute ago, there must be a stipend policy on file and available upon request. This should document that the cost is reasonable and approved by appropriate personnel. In one case, we were working with the auditors. We had documentation that the stipend that was going to be provided was very well detailed and spelled out. It was a part of a meeting to the group of educators. And you can see here meeting notes that detail the stipend arrangements. The auditor found that to be insufficient because there was no approval or documentation that someone with approval authority identified that amount to be appropriate. So be sure to have some sort of stipend policy on file. We've had a lot of great examples shared with us. So if this is something you'd like to take a look at and reach out to us for assistance, we'd be glad to help you with that. I mentioned this on the last slide. You have to be able to provide that the documentation that teachers actually received the stipend. So this could be in payroll reports or other forms that you have. And you also have to be able to provide clear documentation on what is actually being reimbursed. So that example where there was hotels and registration and a stipend and mileage, being really clear about what is a direct expense that's being reimbursed at the actual cost, or what is a stipend. And again, it could be one, the other, a combination. The documentation needs to be really clear about how the school, or college or ESU approaches that for these different events. A recommendation is always, if there are direct expenses, to have the school, consortium, or college pay those direct expenses directly, if at all possible. Again, our new budget template should help specify a lot of this and trigger, oh, I need to make sure that that's really clearly spelled out. All right. Last finding, here was a reimbursement that we approved for a school, and it include payments for teachers attending a conference. $160 was paid to 13 teachers based on the GSA per diem rate for meals and incidental expenses. Pretty common occurrence. However, the conference agenda showed that lunch was provided for one of those days. So the amount paid to the teacher should have been reduced by that lunch total, and it should have been reduced for a total of $144, but it was not. So as a result, the auditor questioned those costs, and that became another finding. So just a reminder with agendas, we check those to see if a meal was provided. If a meal is provided by an event or a hotel, so if you're staying at a hotel that includes a free breakfast, that needs to come off, even if you don't eat it, right? That's a choice, but if it's provided for free, we cannot then reimburse a cost because someone chose to eat somewhere else. So if a meal is provided, it needs to come out of that per day GSA rate for meals. And then that's what we will be able to reimburse. So overall, the tested sample, as you can see here, was about 2 million, and the total for the whole year was just under 7.5 million. So because of the question cost, which was that 34,000, that's about 1.83%. If you extrapolate that out, the auditor said, we could question up to almost $37,000 of your costs if the same findings occur multiple times, which definitely is nothing we're interested in finding. So we're going to help you all. We're going to be diligent and provide any support we can to make sure the documentation is in place for all of these. And again, this is not specific to Perkins. This is for all federal monies. We also had an exit finding. So an exit finding isn't included in the auditor's published report, but it's definitely an issue that we need to address before next year when the auditors visit us again, which we didn't also know. They follow up the following year to check in and see how we're doing with our corrective actions. So our exit finding was that not all equipment purchases by the subrecipients were pre-approved by the agency. You've heard us say pre-approval. Terry said it many times. This is why. So because of that, the auditor recommended we improve our procedures and processes to ensure that we approve all of your equipment purchases prior to payment. And we are trying to do that right now through this meeting. And also, as we've alluded to, we've updated our budget template to make sure it's very clear and easy and specific what is being purchased, so we can make sure that you have that pre-approval prior to purchase, because if you don't have the pre-approval prior to purchase and you go for reimbursement, we are going to be unable to reimburse you for that equipment. So happy to help. Let us know if there's ever a question or you're not sure what needs to be pre-approved, but I'll err on the side of everything needs to be pre-approved, and capital expenditures, a whole even separate pre-approval process. So what are we going to do about it? As I mentioned, this meeting certainly is one of those. We're going to continue to provide technical assistance to subrecipients, make sure our staff who are reviewing all of the reimbursement requests and budgets initially are very clear. We are going to work with everyone to make sure there's a stipend policy on file. This was something we hadn't really focused on in the past, but now we're hyper aware of. since this, and we've talked with several recipients, subrecipients, many of you have this, right? This should be on file for all federal grants. So if this is giving you a little nervous energy, reach out to us and we can help show you some examples and make sure your policy looks great. Our compliance team and grants and budget management team would also be very happy to help you. And then we'll continue to conduct regular desk audits to just make sure everything's in place. Sydney mentioned we'll be spot checking different things, or Terry did. Again, just to help everyone make sure the documentation is in place where it needs to be. All right. So with that, one of the things that is coming, and Sydney, I think I'm turning this back over to you to talk about, is our updated CTE Administrator's Guide.
Yes, and so we are excited to have everything in one spot. As you can see from the chat, I have 2 different websites where I'm showing the different budget templates. We're using the same Perkins Management Guide as guidance, but we want to make sure that it's truly an administrator's guide to the grant. And so talking about programs, talking about revision, we want to clearly outline allowable and non-allowable expenses for both the Perkins and the CTE grant. And so, again, we are working through this guide. Our goal is to have it ready for today. There's still a few little tweaks that we need to make, but hopefully in the coming weeks, you'll see it posted on the website too.
Thanks, Sydney. Yes, so this will be the primary source of truth for all things CTE implementation. And it actually goes beyond the grant. So this truly is anyone administering CTE programs. It will include funding sources for the programs, which would be our 2 formula grants and our 1 competitive grant, as well as program implementation for career ed programs, which is what our management guide has now. So switching the name, it's not going to be Perkins focused. This will be truly a CTE administrator's guide. It's very close to being finished. I think you'll appreciate the care we took to be really explicit between the different funding sources. So if you have a question, you can look and immediately see what's allowable, what's not allowable, and what you need to do to provide that documentation. This should be up and running very soon, and we'll make sure you all have that direct link and you'll be able to find it easily on our website. Also a note, this will address both secondary and post-secondary CTE administration and grants. And as always, if you need anything, please feel free to reach out to your grant monitor. If you don't know who your grant monitor is, let us know and we'll be sure to connect you. They are the easiest way to connect someone here specific to your programs. We're very intentional about those assignments, so definitely start with your grant monitor. Please review the new administrator's guide once it comes out. You'll see the new layout and format. Some of it will feel very familiar. We'll be sure to keep our website updated. Just like with our administrator's guide, we're also consolidating our websites. So instead of having to go to 2 separate sites for the grants, it's going to be very clear, one-stop shop, and then you can access the information you need. Also, some great resources in the Canvas catalog specific to the grants management. I believe they have some how-tos. The federal program site also has great time and effort resources and just other general federal grant resources. So be sure to take a look at those pages. And then go to our experts. We have Terry and Amanda who are here and ready to help you. Please reach out to them for both grants or any other question related to CTE, and they'll make sure they get you to the right person. All right, now for the fun stuff. Going to turn it over to Kevin Dahlman, CTE Data Research and Evaluation Specialist Extraordinaire, to talk about some data reporting and accountability reminders.
Thanks, Katie. So again, I'm Kevin Dahlman. I'm the CTE Data Specialist, and we're just going to talk briefly about a few data things, in particular about performance improvement plans, Perkins report cards, reporting timelines, and a new resource for helping with the revision process, P2C, Career Pathways to Careers. So go ahead and start. Next slide. And then, so within your Perkins annual grant narrative, local education agencies and consortia must review their Perkins performance outcomes relative to state targets. And these are kind of based on the 7 indicators that we report to the federal government and are required. So members of Perkins Consortium are held responsible for their overall performance outcomes. They should review their data as it contributes to the consortium's overall performance. So we set what are known as state targets or state goals, also known as state determined levels of performance. So all three of those words are kind of used interchangeably: targets, goals, and SDLPs. And each year we determine, so these are those goals themselves. If a program does not perform within 90% of these goals, then they will have to do a performance improvement plan, or a PIP as we call it. So current PIPs will be based on this first column here, 23, 24, and these were the state goals that we set for this most recent reporting year, or the current PIPs. For next year's data, which will be submitted June 15th, we'll come to that slide in a minute with the reporting deadlines. These are the goals that will be applied to for reporting year, next reporting year. So anything you're working on now would be in regards to the state determined levels of performance, STLPs, in the first column. So performance improvement plan, when you include it in your annual grant narrative, if you need to, again, we'll have these outlined on the website about who and on what measure which agencies need to actually do it each year. And when you submit it, it often can be one of these 3 examples that you can lead to in your program improvement. So a review to determine the data quality or accuracy of your data submitted, sometimes professional development or for the staff or faculty, and then instructional program, improve strategies to improve your instruction and student achievement. So report cards themselves for each district or LEA can be found on the website, and it's from these report cards that we determine whether or not PIPs are necessary. And they're summarized in a nice table on the website, so it's pretty clear which agencies do and do not need to require a PIP in their annual narrative. So these are the data reporting deadlines. So come June 15th, secondary data will need to be submitted. And then we have a 2-week window where if there are changes that are necessary, we can change those before the final deadline of June 30th, from which after that date, data cannot be changed without a written request that is approved by a board. So it's kind of, if it's not, first off, it needs to be submitted by the 15th, and then if there needs to be changes after the 30th, changes cannot be made without written approval. And that's just for secondary. And then the same thing for post-secondary, except it's October 15th is the initial deadline, and then the final deadline is October 30th, to which data cannot be changed after that deadline. And then here's a new resource, the P2C website. In reviewing a couple of the action grants so far, I know some of the districts have been using this already, so I hope you guys like it and it's helpful. There's a videos to watch on how to actually use this. It basically allows you to connect your school or district's data to the labor market data, and it breaks it down by region and so forth. And it's just works really well and a very good resource to use in your revision process. And then lastly, we have the course codes and cleared endorsement website that has just been updated. At the top of the page, you'll notice the change summary link where you can click, and it'll highlight all the changes from the last year's course code and cleared endorsement site.
Awesome.
And that's all for me.
Yeah. So now thinking about looking ahead, as Katie promised, we have that new CTE Grants Administrators website that will be coming as your one-stop shop for all things grant administration. And so we know that it can be cumbersome going to different websites, and we want to make sure it's all in one spot for easy access. With the new onboarding of some new staff members, we will be shifting some contacts here at the department for those that monitor the Perkins grant. And so some of those changes may occur, and you will be notified of those changes as those assignments are made. We also have some really great upcoming professional learning this summer. One in particular is the Nebraska Career Education Conference held in Kearney every year. This will be the 51st annual NCE conference, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But we also are providing our Jumpstart teacher training for those on career ed permits or in the transition to teaching program. That will be in Lincoln on July 14th through the 17th. I know we have had some administrators reach out about those offerings, and so registration for that will open soon, and we will send out a notification when that is open. We are also hosting the technical skills workshops, and again, once those are finalized, we'll be sending out a registration and information around those workshops. And those are primarily for our STS, our skilled and technical sciences, and ag, food, and natural resources educators. And again, those will be shared as well. And so the NCE conference, as I shared, it will be held June 9th through the 11th in Kearney, Nebraska. We have some amazing speakers lined up. We have some content area sessions as well as administrator sessions. We do have some updates around the grants. We'll be providing some just breakout sessions and some question and answer sessions around those. A great lineup. Everything can be found on the NCE conference. And so we hope to see you out there. We hope you send your teachers out there. It's a wonderful event. And then again, we will be back here in the fall for our fall CTE Grant Administrators meeting. So please save the date. We will open up registration probably in the coming months, and we hope to see you here in the fall. Some other pieces we just want to offer from a technical assistance standpoint. We have a list. These are all fall under the area of career technical and adult education. And so we are happy to have a call. We're happy to come out to your district. If you have any questions regarding GMS, regarding career academies, implementation of programs of study, implementations of standards, we have a wonderful team of leaders that are here to serve you and to ensure high quality CTE programs across the state. So with that, we do have some time for questions. Feel free to include those in the chat or to come off mute, and we will answer those questions.